Karen, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
If John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John.
Yeah. Roberta in the truth zone, mic hitting raw. Spotlight shining, she exposing the flaw. Debunking the myth, breaking their facade. This is Glass City, respect the squad. On these NYC blocks where the skyline flex big. Roberta Glass slicing lies with a truth rig. Innocence frosters, your stories unravel. She's a map through the madness of gritty gravel. Glass don't bend and facts don't break. She's a storm that's called, you feel the quake. Exposing tales stitched with crooked seams. Justice in the lens, shattered fake dreams. Screams about killers, painted heroes in disguise. She burning propaganda with fire in her eyes. No glamour for the guilty, she call it straight. She backs victims, the voice stay awake. Stats and receipts, no spin, no clutter. Cold cases whisper, she cuts through the mutter. Truth's her tempo, don't confuse the beat. She's standing for the real while you taking a seat. True crime's a block, facts the artillery. Spinning those lies, yo, she checks that misery. Tabloid tales get smashed, no time to play. She's glass hard, break the false and save the day. True crime's a block, facts the artillery. Spinning those lies, yo, she checks that misery. Tabloid tales get smashed, no time.
Okay. How is everybody? Hello, Susan Hicks. Hello, Second Beach Gal, Rockstar 60, Myrna. Hello, everybody. Just us chickens here. Wanted to go over something I've really never gone over, which is Alan Jackson's opening. Now, I was talking with my girlfriend about how Karen Reed can defend herself. Certainly rumors been going around to all. Everybody's been sending me messages that Karen Reed's going to change her defense. She's going to go with very much the staircase defense, and Al did it. John O'Keefe was pushed down the stairs, or a dog made him fall down the stairs. Some kind of Michael Peterson defense minus the owl, but now we have a dog in place of the owl. I don't know if any of this is true. Certainly none of the Free Karen readers are noticing that there's been a great difference between the beginning of her tale and the end of her tale. You know, where it's going, it changes. Bringing in Brian Higgins as a suspect, it's taking the place of Jennifer McCabe and the McAlberts. Now we have the Higgins is the bad guy, and Proctor, and Higgins is taken over for Jen McCabe and Brian Albert. They don't seem to blink an eye that her defense has changed so much, but okay. So it may pivot again, but let's take a look at, we previously looked at Hank Brennan's brilliant opening. Besides his time being a little wackadoo, his timings were a little off the wall. It was a brilliant opening, about as good as an opening as you're going to get in court. No notes, speaking directly to the jury and telling a story and bringing them in, pulling them in. Thought it couldn't have been better. But here, let's look at Alan Jackson. Of course, uses a script much longer and repeats over and over again, no collision, no collision, no collision. Are they really going to tell the jury now that there was no collision? I mean, really? I don't know. Let's see if it works. But Here's Alan Jackson's opening. Let's watch together. You know, he's buttoning up his jacket. You know he's getting serious then.
May I, Your Honor? The evidence in this case will establish above everything else 3 points. There was no collision with John O'Keefe. There was no collision. There was no collision. John O'Keefe did not die.
So if I just keep saying no collision over and over again, maybe I'll convince someone by just psychic hypnosis. My psychic will. Hey, Maddie, thanks so much. I mean, unreal. No collision, This is called the illusionary truth effect. The more you hear something, the more you're bound to believe it's true. Just keep saying it over and over and over again. I know that you saw Karen Reed's taillight pieces all over the crime scene. I know you saw the murder vehicle, her parents taking the murder vehicle away from One Meadows. But really, there was no collision. No collision at all. She just got that from, first they say, I want to say love tapping John O'Keefe's car, but then the free camera readers will also say that you can't break your taillight, that taillight cannot be broken with any force.
From being hit by a vehicle, period. The facts will show that. The evidence will show that. The data will show that. The science will show that. And the experts will tell you that. You'll learn that the Commonwealth has pinned its entire case on a brazen and a flawed assertion that is untethered, unconnected to the facts and to the evidence. And their assertion is contrary to science. Because at the end of the day, folks, there was no collision with John O'Keefe. So how did we end up here? How does Karen Reed end up sitting in that chair on trial for an event that literally never happened? Well, the evidence is going to explain it. And it can be summed up in the following text message at the very beginning of this investigation. A text message of a now fired Massachusetts State Police officer named Michael Proctor. He was the lead investigator on this case. And he was talking about a fellow officer, a fellow cop who owned the property where John O'Keefe's body was found. Text message with a buddy. Question, is the homeowner going to catch any shit? Answer, nope. He's a Boston cop too.
Oh, pauses for dramatic. Oh, he's a Boston cop too. So that explains it. That explains. They all wanted to just frame the adjunct finance professor. They call her a convenient outsider. It doesn't really work. I mean, there's never been really any answer why everyone hated Karen Reed immediately. And that they knew to blame Karen Reed. No one knew to blame Karen Reed until Karen Reed started saying, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. That was their first clue. But Alan Jackson would say, well, then why wasn't she arrested? Well, they had to do somewhat of an investigation before they arrested her. Before they saw her car and they really could put it together. And found her taillight pieces all over the scene. I mean, are they really, is a jury really going to buy that Proctor somehow planted all the evidence, manipulated all the cell phone data, everything? I mean, really? Just because the thin blue line is that strong?
That quote defines the lack of integrity of the Commonwealth's entire case, its entire investigation, and this prosecution. During the course of this trial, you'll learn much more about Mr. Proctor, why he said that, and what it really means. What you'll see and hear in this courtroom in the coming weeks is not just a story of a tragic loss. And make no mistake, John O'Keefe's death is and was a tragic and tragic loss. But the story you'll hear is about an investigation that was riddled with errors from the beginning, a rush to judgment, conflicted and corrupted from the start, corrupted by bias, corrupted by incompetence, and corrupted by deceit. Finally, it was corrupted by a deliberate effort to avoid and to cover up the very truth that you are seeking. You'll find when you hear the evidence that the Commonwealth's case is the literal definition of reasonable doubt. They won't be able to talk their way out of it. They won't be able to explain their way out of it. They won't be able to excuse their way out of it. And they can't meet their extreme burden of proof, which the court will tell you is beyond any and all reasonable doubt.
Wow, that's something. That is some deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. They're not going to be able to talk their way out of it. Sort of like how Karen Reed has tried to talk her way out of it. I mean, we can go through all her statements that have been played in court, which I found very effective. I'm, of course, not the jury. I don't know who's on the jury. Like I've said, these innocence fraud campaigns are very strong. The press has totally joined in with Karen Reed, supporting her every bit of the way, not asking any tough questions, certainly. But in not asking any follow-up questions, just letting them, letting you lie to them point blank. So I don't know. I mean, to say that the state's case has no integrity, when we've looked at the way that this defense team has conducted themselves, this is like pretty fighting words from a team that has just not handed over discovery, used every means of fraud, tried this case in the court of public opinion, gotten journalists on their side like Gretchen Voss, and said, don't talk about this piece of evidence till we put it in an unrelated filing, use filings to mount an innocence fraud campaign. I mean, accused people with no evidence and then said, well, we don't know. We're not detectives. We don't know who did it. It's not meant to. Mounted a witness harassment campaign, and they're going to accuse the Commonwealth of having no integrity. Seriously? I mean, we could go into what they did with their ARCA witnesses, Marie Russell, Richard Green.
And to a moral certainty.
All hid discovery. Wait, hold on. Let me go back.
Proof, which the court will tell you is beyond any and all reasonable doubt. And
see, so now he's trying to also mix up the idea of reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is not beyond any doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. So he's going to make it that now a reasonable doubt is having any small doubt at all, reasonable or not. You see how he did that? Let's hear it again.
Their way out of it, and they can't meet their extreme burden of proof, which the court will tell you is beyond any and all reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. Members of the jury, Karen Reed found John O'Keefe dead on the front lawn of a Boston police officer, Brian Albert, at 6 a.m. on January 29th, 2022. Picture the scene. Blood-curdling screams, ambulances, emergency lights on, fire engines, ladder trucks, paramedics, patrol vehicles, patrol cruisers, police officers, first responders, firefighters, all swarming all over Brian Albert's lawn, literally feet under his bedroom window. Yet Brian Albert, a sworn peace officer, a first responder himself, never came outside. Never went outside to see what the chaos was about, never went outside to see if he could assist a man in need, never walked outside his house to see if he could help a fallen fellow officer on his own front lawn. More shockingly, you'll learn that lead investigator for the Massachusetts police, Michael Proctor, never set foot inside Brian Albert's house that day. Never engaged in any investigation inside that house that day, even though a party with much alcohol had just occurred in that house, and even though a Boston police officer was found dead or dying just mere feet from the front door on that lawn. He never secured the crime scene, never separated and secured witnesses. He never properly collected evidence. He never secured the evidence. He never searched for signs of a struggle inside or outside the home. He never properly canvassed the neighborhood. Michael Proctor never did any of these things, even though fellow officers of Michael Proctor's actually mentioned, in their words, not mine, that it looked like John O'Keefe may have been, quote, in a fight. You'll have questions about that conduct. During the course of this trial, you'll find that the Commonwealth will not have answers. You'll see from the evidence in this case that this case carries a malignancy, one that is spread through the investigation. It's spread through the prosecution from the very start, from the jump. A cancer that cannot be cut out, a cancer that cannot be cured.
Yeah, it sounds like your innocence fraud campaign. It's a cancer that can't be cured.
And that cancer has a name. His name is Michael Proctor. Now, you didn't hear his name.
I say the cancer's name is your innocence fraud campaign. Karen Reed and her lying lawyers and enablers innocence fraud campaign. I'd call it that. I mean, I don't think we're headed towards, I would doubt we're headed towards an acquittal. And I don't know who was asking in the chat if this is live. This is live. I've just never talked about Alan Jackson's opening statement. Said it'd save it for another day, or said the same thing about Hank Brennan's opening statement. We went over that recently. So this is the other day. This is the other day. I thought it'd be a good time to go back to it. As we don't have court the weekend, obviously, but we don't have court Monday for the holiday.
In the prosecution's opening statement, not once. And I suspect that was probably by design. But make no mistake about it, the evidence will show in this case that Michael Proctor is the very definition of the Commonwealth's case. And he's also their Achilles heel. He was the lead investigator on the case officer, the architect of the entire prosecution. You'll learn there's not a single part of this case, folks, not a single part that he didn't touch, that he didn't direct, that he didn't orchestrate personally. Every single bit of it has his fingerprints on it. You'll learn that Michael Proctor was a longtime family friend of the Alberts. And he's been disgraced by his own agency, not by us, by the Massachusetts State Police. Investigated, suspended.
Because of messages, mean texts, and driving drunk. Not planning evidence, not framing someone for murder. That's how he disgraced himself, with mean text messages and driving under the influence.
And fired. The evidence will show that Massachusetts State Police found Michael Proctor guilty of bringing dishonor to the department for his conduct, not in some other case, not in some tangential case. In this case, the investigation of Karen Reed, conduct that included bias in favor of his friends, the all-powerful Albert family, and bias against my client, Miss Reed, the outsider.
Right, the outsider, like Karen Reed raised more than $1 million with her innocence fraud campaign. She is not the little guy up against it. She's the man. Proctor, the Alberts, the all-powerful, what are they, a dynasty? Anybody ever heard of the Albert family? What are they, like the Mellons and it's so ridiculous. The Rothschilds, the all-powerful Albert family. How do they deliver this with a straight face?
Do you have any idea how hard it is for a state trooper to get fired? The evidence is going to show that Michael Proctor earned it. Every bit of it. You'll hear that when an
apparently not that hard. Apparently just start a federal investigation and get their private phones because people talk crap. That's what they do. It's not that hard. And then combine it with some of their slip up on the job, like driving under the influence, and then you've got to fire it.
Of a Boston police officer being found dead on Brian Albert's lawn, Michael Proctor, the lead investigator, who had investigated exactly nothing up to this point, right at the beginning, made an early pronouncement that Brian Albert himself was not going to, quote, catch any shit, end quote. And that was for one reason and one reason only. He's a Boston cop. The evidence will show that Michael Proctor made this statement in a text conversation with his high school buddies, a text he never thought would see the light of day, certainly never thought we would get a hold of. And when he thought no one was looking, he actually said the quiet part out loud. He's a cop too. We'll give him a pass. You'll learn that in Michael Proctor's world,
kind of like how you're getting a pass in your profession. He's a lawyer too. Give him a pass. David Unetti, he's a lawyer too. Give him a pass. From all your fraudulent, corrupt behavior, Judge Cannoni, just give them a lecture when they violate discovery over and over again. All right.
Rank has its privileges. The evidence will show that's privileges that you don't get and I don't get. But apparently a Boston police officer, Brian Albert, and his friends, they do get. You'll learn that in Michael Proctor's world, he didn't care about finding the truth. In his world, his priority was to protect the brotherhood, to protect that blue wall, to protect his friends who were at the Alberts' house that night. I want to take a step back, if I could, and spend the next few minutes.
These are all innocence fraud lines that they throw out in these innocence fraud campaigns. The investigator had to close the case so fast that they didn't care about the truth. That they would be totally okay with framing an innocent person for a murder because they had to close things up so quickly. They could live with putting an innocent person in prison for 20 years. I mean, they didn't care about the truth. There's no evidence, right? There's no sign of a collision. There's no evidence. That's essentially what he's saying. She was convicted on no evidence, which I always say must have been a very short trial. The prosecution presented their no evidence and everyone voted to convict. 12 jurors try to get 12 strangers to agree on anything, even what to have for lunch. It's like pretty hard, but they're going to agree that someone's guilty with no evidence. I mean, these are all the lines that get repeated in our media and get repeated in these innocence fraud campaigns.
That's talking a little bit more detail about what the actual facts in this case will show, not based on speculation, not based on surmise, not based on guesswork or conjecture, but the actual true facts that you will learn through the course of this trial. On January 28th, 2022, it was a Friday night. John and Karen had made plans to meet up with friends for drinks. It was a happy and normal night for them. They were affectionate, they were loving, they were in good spirits, nothing out of the ordinary. They started at a local watering hole.
That should give you pause. Anytime someone says it's a normal night, nothing was out of the ordinary. It was very ordinary. They were so affectionate towards each other, except for the time that Karen Reed gave John O'Keefe the finger, except for that time. And the awkward body language between the two, except for that. Except for the fact that they were fighting all morning, according to Karen Reed. Except for all that, it was very ordinary.
Called C.F. McCarthy's. You've heard that name before and you'll hear it again. And eventually they made their way over to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, another bar where they ended up. When they got to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, the Albert family was already there, already heavily drinking. You'll learn that this was no ordinary family, the Alberts. The Albert family was a well-known Canton family. Some might even describe them as a very powerful Canton family. Brian Albert was there at the Waterfall. You'll hear that he's a longtime Boston police officer. His wife, Nicole Albert, was there with him. His brother, Chris Albert, a powerful Canton politician. He sits on the select board. The select board actually governs the police department, the Canton PD. He was there. His wife, Julie Albert, was there. Their daughter, Caitlin Albert, was there. His sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe, was there. Her husband, Matt McCabe, was also there. They were all there drinking before John and before Karen ever arrived. You'll learn that a man by the name of Brian Higgins, also a law enforcement officer and longtime friend, longtime pal of Brian Albert, he was also there. And the two of them, the two Bryans, had been drinking most of the night together. You'll see video footage from the Waterfall, which will show you that Karen and John were happy. They were affectionate. They were caring. They were loving. Just business as usual, out on a date on a Friday night. But that exact same video footage which lead investigator Michael Proctor plainly chose to ignore that video footage. It paints a very different picture of Brian Higgins. You'll learn that Higgins had romantic designs for Karen. That becomes important. Brian Higgins had engaged Karen in flirtatious texts.
I love Buchanan's testimony. He's like, no, I think it's more like your client had designs on Brian Higgins and he was trying to figure out what was going on. He had designs.
But days earlier, she had put a stop to it. She had ghosted him, in common parlance. In other words, just ignored him. The evidence will show that the first time he saw her and was in her presence after being rejected by her was when she walked into the Waterfall Bar and Grill along with her boyfriend, John O'Keefe. At 11:58 p.m., just minutes before John ultimately arrived at the Albert residence, you'll see a video at the Waterfall of an unsettling interaction, troubling interaction between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. And unlike the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, in this case, you won't ignore that evidence. As the bar was closing around 12 midnight, the Alberts invited everybody back to their house for a get-together to just keep the night going. And you'll learn that Karen and John ultimately pulled up to the house. They got out of the SUV to make sure they had the right address. You see, neither John nor Karen had ever been to 34 Fairview. They weren't even sure they were at the right address. And the evidence will establish that John got out of the SUV and went into the house. Let me say that again. The facts unequivocally, the data, the science, the witnesses will all unequivocally establish that John O'Keefe went into the Albert home that night. Eyewitnesses and forensic data will establish that fact. When he didn't come back out, you'll learn that Karen grew increasingly frustrated. She got upset. She was left alone in a car in the cold, in the middle of the night, with the car idling. John had gone into the house. She expected him to come right back out. And when he didn't, seconds turned into minutes, and minutes started to clock away. She left John a voicemail, then another voicemail, voicemail after voicemail after voicemail, text messages. But he was unresponsive. He didn't pick up a single call. He didn't respond to a single text. The longer he didn't respond, the more upset she got. The Commonwealth will intimate, as they already have in their opening statement, that these voicemails are evidence that the two were fighting. The actual evidence in this case, however, will show the exact opposite. You'll hear that Karen was very agitated. You'll hear some voicemails where she's swearing. You'll hear voicemails where she calls him names. There's name calling. But you'll also hear the context of those voicemails. And every single one of those voicemails was left for John after he failed to come back out of the house, after he failed to respond to her voicemails and to her texts. Karen believed John had just left her sitting there, grabbed a beer, was partying with his friends. The evidence will actually show that John and Karen never had a crossword, not a single crossword that entire evening before he left that SUV and went inside the house. And you will learn what Karen had absolutely no way of knowing at the time. It wasn't that he wouldn't respond to her. It's that he couldn't respond to her. And the evidence will show you why. Let's talk about that. We'll introduce you to a doctor named Elizabeth Lopasada, a renowned forensic pathologist who was basically fired for her job as medical examiner in Rhode Island, and now makes a living grifting, being a whore of the court, saying whatever defense attorneys want her to say in various trials. Pathologist, a medical examiner, and a professor at Brown University. She will tell you that the injury to the back of John's head, first of all, Brown University, that also had an entire art exhibit dedicated to Mumia Abu Jamal, the cop killer, who first was on death row, and then he got his conviction overturned because he was just like a cause celeb killer. For what reason? For no reason at all. Nothing to have to do with his innocence. He just had his conviction changed to life. He's still in life, but that didn't stop Brown University from having a whole exhibit of his artwork. I think they put in how do you say this? An installation of his cell on death row. And he's the unrepentant murderer of Officer Daniel Faulkner. It's a notorious case, one of which I've covered, but it's one of the longer innocence fraud cases that just goes on and on and on and on. Never ends. Ball was immediately incapacitating, and that has meaning. At the moment he suffered that fatal head injury, he couldn't walk, talk, grab his phone, cry for help, nothing. He was completely incapacitated, completely unconscious from the moment he suffered that injury. He was completely still and incapable of interacting with anyone or anything. But the doctor will tell you something more and just as important. She'll tell you that John O'Keefe did not suffer from hypothermia, as the Commonwealth will undoubtedly allege. His body showed no signs of it. No frostbite, no cold-induced injuries to his organs, no damage based on cold or frost. Okay, just to let you know, this is the medical examiner. I don't make this stuff up. Okay. Library exhibition. So La Posada comes from Brown University, or teaches at Brown. It's the medical examiner who's going to shill for Karen Reed in this trial. Here's Brown University library exhibition on this Officer Daniel Faulkner's murderer, Mumia Abu Jamal, to shed light on the experience and impact of incarceration.
Strangely, they're not doing an exhibit on the impact of murder on the victim's family. Strangely not, just the murderer's experience. An exhibition and a symposium at Brown University will use Abu Jamal's writings, correspondence, and creative work as the entry point into a larger conversation about the impact of the American carceral system on millions of lives. I would say that an upcoming exhibition at Brown University will share valuable insights into the incarcerated life of Mumia Abu Jamal, a political activist. The New York Times once described as the most visible of the 3,000 people waiting execution to America's death rows. The exhibition of a rare special collection of written papers and other materials will give scholars and members of the public a sense of the sweeping impact of the American carceral system has on millions of lives, including the family and friends of those who spent time in prison and jails. Not the family and friends of those who had their loved ones murdered. Voices of Mass, accompanying the exhibition's opening is Voices of Mass Incarceration, a symposium. And Amanda Strauss, director of the John Hay Library at Brown, said that beyond an examination into one incarcerated person's life, the exhibition and symposium offer a broader view into mass incarceration. Among the items exhibited is Mumia Abu Jamal, or his personal belongings of Abu Jamal, including art supplies, a prison-issue radio, and a pair of his eyeglasses. So that's a prison-issued radio, and his eyeglasses are all going to be on display at a museum. Also his writings, and the symposium will include the premiere of Vampire Nation, an original piece composed by Abu Jamal that will be performed by an ensemble of Brown graduate students. Okay. Okay, here you go. Visitors will have the opportunity, I kid you not, to view a replica of a 6x9 solitary confinement cell, much like the one where Abu Jamal was once kept for 22 hours a day, from his voluminous collections, which his voluminous collections originated. So his cell is going to be on their death row. Just okay, back to Alan Jackson.
Ladies and gentlemen, the scientific evidence and the medical evidence will establish that John O'Keefe had to be injured somewhere else, somewhere warmer, and his body had to have been moved out into the cold. And that's where ultimately at 6 a.m., Karen found him the next morning. You will learn that John did not have a single injury consistent with being hit by a car. Let me say that again. The evidence will establish that John did not suffer a single injury on his body consistent with having been hit by a car. Not one. You'll learn that John's torso, his ribs, his chest, his arms, his hips, his legs, his knees, his ankles, his feet, all of them, no broken bones, no fractures, no contusions, no torn ligaments, no internal injuries, not even a bruise. Nothing consistent with a car accident, despite the Commonwealth's.
Right, but he was clipped, right? But he had a big egg over his eye. Lots of damage to his arm from the taillight. You combine also the glass breaking with the taillight. That adds an extra element because he wasn't bruised enough. They're gonna say it wasn't a car. This is also a technique of innocence fraud. Say things should look like this. They should look like that.
contention that he was slammed into by a 6,000-pound SUV. Not.
Please hit the thumbs up, guys. Just coming in, we're going over Alan Jackson's opening statement and Karen Reed's second trial.
A bruise. Dr. LaPosada will tell you with medical certainty that, in fact, John was not struck by a vehicle. Medically and scientifically, he could not have been struck by a vehicle. Therefore, as I said, there was no collision.
Wait, Alan Jackson, I'm confused. Was there a collision or was there not? How many times is he going to say no collision? You should have kept a rolling tally up to now. Has he said it 10 times, 8 times, 7 times since the beginning? Wesley loves Octoberfest. Is gifted 10, count them, 10 memberships. They'll be passed out at random. Very generous of you. Thank you, Wesley. I appreciate it.
She will tell you that the patterned abrasions on John's right arm, the patterned abrasions you see over my left shoulder, they're not the result of being struck by a car or a taillight. You'll take one look at these injuries and you'll agree with Dr. LaPosada. The evidence will show that these injuries are from an animal, like a large dog, like the large dog that was inside the Albert house that night. You'll learn that Brian Albert has actually admitted that his large dog, the family dog, is, quote, not good with strangers. And of course, John, never having been to the house before, was a stranger that night. You'll also learn that oddly, very oddly, after having their family pet for 7 years, a short time after this incident, the Alberts got rid of that dog. They called it rehoming her, but she was gone. Dr. LaPosada will also tell you that the injury to John's head was not the result of falling backward onto a flat lawn, cold or otherwise. Rather, Dr. LaPosada will tell you with medical certainty that the injury pattern to his scalp was produced by an impact from a raised or ledged surface, a surface that does not exist on Brian Albert's front lawn where John was found. The medical evidence will establish no hypothermia, no injuries from a car strike, no collision with a motor vehicle. And forensic analysis of John's cell phone, Mr. Brennan mentioned that in his opening.
So here's what my girlfriend was saying. Could they bring in, are they going to bring in Marie Russell? I mean, they've hardly brought in any evidence of a dog has come in. And speaking of, we haven't seen Dr. Crosby for the Commonwealth either. There's hardly been any talk of a dog. So is Marie Russell going to come in? I think we have Welshler and that's it. I think he's the last witness. Are we going to have rebuttal witnesses for the Commonwealth? How is this going to go?
Statement. The Commonwealth's own expert will ultimately support the exact facts that I just told you, including the temperature data. John O'Keefe was injured someplace warmer, and he was moved. That alone is reasonable doubt, but there's much more. You'll also learn that there were many people at that after-hours gathering at Brian Albert's house who would have left by the front door just feet from where John O'Keefe's body would have ultimately been had he actually been there right after 12:30 a.m., which is what the Commonwealth's claim is. There were nearly a dozen people who walked out that front door directly adjacent to the precise spot where John O'Keefe would have been lying. Not a single person, not one, not a single person saw a 6'2", 216-pound man laying sprawled in the front lawn in dark clothing on a light white dusting of snow. Not one. Then the evidence will also show that every one of those same people drove by that same spot, not walked by it, drove by it to leave the house, and still not one of them saw John laying in the yard when they left between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning. But you know who else you'll find never saw a body on that lawn? The snowplow driver, a completely independent witness charged with plowing the streets in Canton that night. You'll hear that Michael Proctor...
a completely independent witness who's changed his story after being basically threatened to be the new Higgins or Jen McCabe or Brian Albert, strangely has changed what he's seen a zillion times. I mean, Hank Brennan will destroy any of these people in Cross, whether it's Marie Russell or the ARCA witnesses. I don't know about La Posada. She's like a professional witness, so she's used to... That's going to be a little harder. I don't know. But she obviously didn't, she's doing her analysis from pictures. It's not great.
Oh, he's not done yet, Mr. Proctor. You'll hear that Michael Proctor wrote a report where he claimed that Fairview had not been plowed that night. You'll learn that that was completely false. That was a lie. Michael Proctor did not want any more witnesses. He didn't want the truth. And he falsely claimed that the road was never plowed. You'll learn that he wouldn't look for the plow driver, but we did. And we found, and we'll introduce you to, Brian Loughran. He plowed Fairview that night, and what he's going to tell you is that there was no body on that lawn at 2:30 in the morning. You'll learn that Brian Loughran passed by 34 Fairview, traveling right next to Brian Albert's front yard, and at 2:30 a.m., John O'Keefe was not there. But you'll see that the plow driver also provides some other troubling information, troubling testimony for the Commonwealth. You'll learn that after making that pass at 2:30 a.m., he showed up with his plow an hour later. He stopped at the entrance of Fairview. He was looking up Fairview to decide whether or not to plow it, but he saw an obstruction. At 3:30 a.m., he looked down the street, and in the very spot precisely where Karen would later find John's body laying at 6 a.m., there was a car parked in front of it, a Ford Edge. You're going to ask yourself, who's moving a car at 3:30 in the morning into a blizzard on the side of the road? You'll learn that Michael Proctor, the lead investigator, intentionally ignored this fact as well. He did no investigation to find out who owned a Ford Edge, but again, we did. And the evidence will establish that Ford Edge happens to be a favorite model of the Albert family. More than one Albert owned a Ford Edge at the time. You'll learn that those facts will add to the mounting and the overwhelming evidence that there was no collision and John O'Keefe's body was moved onto that lawn.
I'm sorry, I'm just mesmerized by that the Ford Edge is a favorite of the Albert family. As if they're really, as if they're like the royal family. They travel in that special car. This is like an eggplant colored car that the royal family has, the Albert family. If you're in part of the Albert family, then you're prone to drive a Ford Edge. It's all ridiculous.
You'll find that this is yet additional reasonable doubt in the case. You'll be introduced to science and physics, even from the Commonwealth's own experts. That science will establish that Karen Reed's SUV was not damaged by hitting a pedestrian, and conversely, John O'Keefe's injuries did not come from being struck by a vehicle. The Commonwealth mentioned triggering events, but what you'll actually learn from the experts, some of them the Commonwealth's own experts, is that a triggering event is not evidence of an accident. It does not evidence a collision. That's why we're here, a collision. And there's no evidence of one, zero. You'll also find that those exact sort of triggering events.
Okay. Oh, wait, did you guys hear it? There's no evidence of a collision. Just keep saying it. Just keep saying it. Hoping that maybe a juror will bring it to the deliberation room. But Alan Jackson said over and over, no evidence of a collision. That's the position I'm going to take. Makes sense to me.
that the Commonwealth will rely on, a relatively commonplace on Karen's SUV.
It was like mind power that just broke the taillight. It was Brian Higgins' frustration at being spurned, at being ghosted by Karen Reed that broke the taillight and threw it all over the crime scene.
SUV, and none of them are associated with a claim of a collision. Folks, the science will not lie and the physics cannot lie.
Like, Karen Reed lies a lot. Actually, that's what Karen Reed was saying when she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. It's actually, she was saying no collision, no collision, no collision. Everyone in this case was misunderstood, misheard somehow.
And that science will tell you with certainty there was no collision with John O'Keefe. You'll add that to that rising mountain of reasonable doubt. I want to take you back to the night in question, January 29th, for just a few minutes. Remember, Karen had gone home after dropping off John and John walking to the house. While Karen was asleep at home with John's 13-year-old niece, what were the people who had been at Brian Albert's house that night? What were they doing? While she slept, what you'll find and what the evidence will show is that they were extremely busy. You'll learn that after a long night of heavy drinking, Brian Higgins left the Albert residence, but he didn't drive home. Rather, he drove over to the Canton Police Department, where he kept an office at about 1:25 a.m. Not a Canton police officer, but he kept an office there. Why go back to his office at 1:25 a.m.? Why go back to the Canton Police Department at 1:25 in the morning on the night of a blizzard? You'll learn that while there, Higgins made a call at 1:30 a.m. Higgins will later deny that he made that call. You'll find that curious. And his explanation for that late night visit to Canton PD, you'll find that it changes nearly every time he's asked about it. You'll learn that after everyone left Brian Albert's house, Brian Albert actually claimed he had no contact with anybody else except his wife. No contact. Until he woke up the next morning. So he says. Then you'll learn that that too is a complete lie. His phone records establish that he placed a call to none other than Brian Higgins at 2:22 a.m. shortly after Higgins completed that late night visit over to Canton PD. You'll wonder, what did they possibly need to talk about at 2:22 a.m. that night? The evidence will establish that Brian Albert called Brian Higgins first. Brian Albert then disconnected that call when Higgins didn't answer it. Seconds later, Brian Higgins returned the call. Brian Albert then did answer that call. They spoke for 22 full seconds, had a conversation, then they both hung up their respective phones. You'll learn that when they were asked about these calls and conversations, both Brian Albert and Brian Higgins lied about it. Both of them. They said they never had a call with each other. But then ultimately, when they were confronted with their own cell phone records and they could no longer deny the calls, they were asked independently, explain yourself. And they both came up with the exact same explanation. A butt dial. The evidence will make you question, why did Albert and Higgins speak at 2:22 a.m.? And why did they both try to cover up that phone call? You'll also learn after this incident and within days of one another, both Brian Higgins and Brian Albert, both police officers, both trained investigators, got rid of their phones. Both of them. And what else you'll learn, Brian Albert got rid of? Shortly after this incident, Brian Albert got rid of his house, the whole thing. Just sold it. His childhood home, a home that had been in the Albert family for generations. He literally sold it mere months after this incident. Dog rehomed, phones destroyed, house sold. You'll learn that all these things happened shortly after the incident where John O'Keefe was found unresponsive and dying in Brian Albert's front lawn. And you'll also learn that Michael Proctor looked the other way. He did not investigate any of what I'm telling you. He pre-selected Karen Reed from the start. And he ignored everything and everyone else.
Right. He pre-selected Karen Reed because he, didn't like her face? He thought she was cute. He didn't like adjunct finance professors. He just picked her out of the blue and started taking her taillight pieces with no opportunity to do so because we know that the car was already on its way to the Sally port when the CERT team was arriving. There's no chance to plant evidence. You're already finding pieces of her taillight when the car was on its way to Sallyport. So when are you going to plant the evidence? There's no opportunity to do that. But apparently Proctor is just magical. He can change cell phone data, the temperature of John's cell phone, the fact that there seems to be some sort of kind of an event with Karen Reed's SUV. And right after John O'Keefe's body stopped moving, almost as if there was a collision, Alan Jackson, almost as if.
Let's get back to what was happening with the others while Karen slept. What you'll learn during this trial is that Brian Albert's sister-in-law,
Wait. What? Well, Karen slept? Did he say that?
and he ignored everything and everyone else. Let's get back to what was happening with the others while Karen slept. What you'll learn during this trial is that Brian Albert's sister-in-law, you've heard her name before, Jennifer McCabe, she was at the waterfall that night, and she was over at the Alberts' house that evening as well. She left the after-hours gathering about 2 a.m., a little before 2 a.m., got home around 2 a.m. And you'll learn that according to the Commonwealth's own evidence from a forensic software program called Physical Analyzer made by Cellebrite, it's considered the gold standard for forensic tools. You'll learn that a Google search was discovered on Jennifer McCabe's phone. A Google search that Michael Proctor and his investigators never revealed to us, but we found anyway. A Google search that was timestamped, according to their own data, at 2:27 a.m. 5 minutes after that 2:22 a.m. call that Higgins and Albert denied having. And that Google search on Jennifer McCabe's phone read, "Hoslong to die in cold." Hoslong to die in cold. Now, she misspelled the first word. Hos is supposed to be how, but the meaning's the same. How long does it take to die in the cold? Timestamped 2:27. And then that search was also noted by the same Cellebrite program as.
Except the Commonwealth will have two excellent witnesses that come in and debunk that entirely.
Having been deleted. The evidence will force you to ask, why is there a search on her phone? Why is it logged at 2:27 a.m.? When the Commonwealth claims that she first learned of John's death and where his body was hours later at 6 a.m. So what you'll learn is that while Karen slept, here's what was actually happening by some other very busy bees. 1:25 a.m., Brian Higgins makes an unexpected visit to Canton PD. 1:30 a.m., he makes a phone call that he later denies ever making. At 2:22 a.m., Brian Higgins and Brian Albert talk. They both deny and lie about having made that phone call. 2:27 a.m., 5 minutes later, a Google search appears on Jennifer McCabe's phone as making, and that she later, or at least it was later logged as deleted. Meanwhile, at 2:30 a.m., the plow driver confirms that O'Keefe's body was not on the lawn of Brian Albert's house, not at 2:30 in the morning. And at 3:30 in the morning, that area was obstructed by a Ford Edge like the one the Albert family liked to own. The evidence will show in the meantime, Karen dozed in and out of a fitful sleep for the rest of the night, only to awaken just before 5 a.m. And that's when she realized in a panic, John had never come home. And you'll see it wasn't like John to not come home. That morning, you'll see and hear evidence that Karen's emotions had morphed. It'd gone from frustration and anger, which you'll hear in the voicemails, to abject fear. Fear that something bad had happened. The evidence will establish by this time Karen was panic-stricken. She had a feeling something was very, very wrong. She was unable to get a hold of John. Karen went to go look for him. She got in her Lexus and she backed up to leave her garage at One Meadows. You'll hear a lot about that address, One Meadows. That was John's house where Karen was staying. She backed out of the garage, and during the course of the trial, you'll hear that she actually struck another car.
Struck another car. She had this almost just like OJ breaking the glass. This incredible piece of bad luck at a crucial point. At the same time, she's telling everyone she hit him, she hit him, she hit him. She's hitting his car, love tapping it. Just in a way, and reversing out of his driveway in a way that she didn't reverse out. Just that morning of the 28th. I mean, just like ridiculous, you know. There's no need to drive into John's car, and strangely, the ring camera evidence of her taillight being smashed to smithereens when she came home is somehow deleted.
With that right rear taillight. During the course of this trial, the Commonwealth is going to desperately claim that Karen Reed's taillight was actually damaged by hitting John O'Keefe. They'll have no evidence of it, mind you, none. But they'll make the claim. We'll show.
No evidence of it. Just the cocktail glass that John O'Keefe was carrying. That was Karen Reed's cocktail glass. She said it was hers. Piece of that on the back bumper. Pieces of Karen Reed's taillight. Microscopic pieces embedded in John O'Keefe's shirt. Pieces of the taillight all over the crime scene, all over, and just in the flagpole area, in the area that she dropped him off, strangely. But gosh darn it, the Commonwealth won't listen to reason.
A video of exactly how that taillight was originally damaged, or exactly what happened at 5:07 in the morning. The facts will show that it was damaged in John's own driveway at 5:07 when Karen backed up and made contact with another car in the driveway. This is 5 hours after she dropped John off and he went into the Albert residence. As a result, the taillight was minimally cracked, but it wasn't completely shattered or damaged or broken. And that's the condition of the SUV when Michael Proctor got a hold of it. That becomes important. You'll hear from an independent police officer, an eyewitness to the damage on that SUV, someone not connected to Michael Proctor or under his control. And he'll tell you that he saw the taillight damaged before it was in Michael Proctor's possession, but it was not completely shattered. And you won't have to speculate how that taillight got cracked originally. You'll see it for yourself. It's on video. You'll learn that part of the reason that Karen's Lexus hit that car at One Meadows is because she backed out looking for him at a time when she was absolutely panic-stricken and grief-stricken. Where was John? Why hadn't he come home? What had happened to him? Is he hurt? Is he passed out somewhere? Her mind was reeling. The evidence will establish she wasn't giving anything away. Everything was on the table. What could have happened to John? You'll learn that when she woke up and he still wasn't home, she was just racking her brain for what could have happened to him. And she was worried about possibly the worst. He had gotten out of the car. He'd walked to the house. She was confused. And later, when she found him at 6 a.m. on the lawn, where she last saw him going toward the house, her mind started reeling. Oh my God, did a plow hit him? Did I hit him? Could I have hit him? What could have happened to him? And that video clip that you saw, out of context, when she said the words, he did not look like he was mortally wounded, she's not talking about at midnight. She's talking about at 6 a.m. when she found him.
Let's go over that. Let's go over that clip again, shall we? Strangely, I have the clip here. And we can Okay. Hold on, let me just.
I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee and incapacitated him? He didn't look mortally wounded as far as I could see, but could I have done something that knocked him out and in his drunkenness and in the cold didn't come to again?
And this would have been the moment you dropped him off at the party.
Would have had to have been. I didn't think I.
Isn't that would have been the moment you dropped him off at the party? Yeah, would have had to been. So let's go back and hear what Alan Jackson just said. He just said that was the next morning.
When she said the words, he did not look like he was mortally wounded, she's not talking about at midnight. She's talking about at 6 a.m. when she found him. That's what she was talking about.
Darn that interviewer. If only he had cleared that up. Right? If only he had cleared that up. Oh, wait, he did.
And this would have been the moment you dropped him off at the party.
Would have had to have been. I didn't.
Okay. So it wasn't the morning after. So it's called lying to the jury.
Your job will be to make sure that the evidence isn't presented to you too cute by half. She was saying all those things. Did a plow hit him? Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? She was saying that to herself and to other people. And the Commonwealth, very obviously, will try to seize on that panic and twist this into some admission. But here's the actual truth. That's not a confession. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Could a plow have hit him? That's a person trying to make sense of an unexplainable circumstance, a natural.
Right. I always ask things that are totally implausible and impractical. Could that have been me? Could I have been abducted by aliens? Could that have happened? Could I, over and over again? I ask totally implausible questions. Thank you, JMS. Thank you, Tanya Vincent says, thank you for streaming today. I was having withdrawals. You don't have to have withdrawals. I'm here.
Concern of
Please hit the thumbs up, guys.
a bereaved significant other, a woman desperately trying to piece together what could have happened on this tragic night. John didn't come home. And the evidence will show that Karen Reed never said, I hit him. Never. Not in the background of the 911 recording, not on any dash cam video, not on any audio, not on any police body cam, not to a first responder. It's never mentioned in a single report. It's never reported in a single report from January 29th, not by one person, because it never happened. The evidence will show that there were at least 13 members of law enforcement or first responders and 2 civilian witnesses that were intently focused on what was happening at that scene. They were all over the lawn. They were all over Karen. Officer Sarath, Mullaney, Good, Lank, EMT Nuttall, Flamati, Kelly, Walsh, Woodbury, Whitley, Becker, Robery, McLaughlin, Carrie Roberts, Jennifer McCabe. They were all there watching and listening. On January 29th, when John O'Keefe was found, not one first responder reported having heard Karen Reed say the words, I hit him. Not one. Not one civilian reported having heard Karen Reed say, I hit him. The facts will show that the first time this improved statement was ever claimed to have been made was some 24 hours later by a single EMT in an interview. Now listen to this. In an interview coordinated by a Canton police detective named Kevin Albert, Brian Albert's brother. And remember, Chris Albert, the other brother, is a board selectman to whom the Canton Police Department reports. And what's more, you'll learn that Katie McLaughlin, that's the EMT, that's the single EMT, the first person to have claimed to have heard this unrecorded and unreported statement, is years long, close personal friends with a young woman named Caitlin Albert. You heard that right. It's Brian Albert's daughter. During the course of this trial, you'll become familiar with and you'll realize that the Alberts are indeed a powerful and indeed an influential family. And that will mean something.
Oh, the dum bum bum. This really needs a dun dun dun. Guess who that was? Set up by an Albert. I thought he was going to say Proctor. I thought Proctor did this all alone, but they all coordinated. You know, talk about not putting it in your reports. Well, when someone's saying, "Did I hit him? I hit him. I hit him. I hit him," it's not seeming hugely important to you at the time until you put it in context of her broken taillight, which was nowhere near the scene of the crime, the murder vehicle. And they hate writing these reports. They're just trying to get them done. A lot of thought. I mean, I think that we really need to talk to our police officers about these innocence fraud campaigns, because there will be more of them, and there'll be more of them pre-trial after Karen Reed. They're so lucrative for lawyers, for our media. I mean, look, Karen Reed's raised more than $1 million that we know of. I mean, that's the figure that it may be more.
You'll learn that there are other major problems with the prosecution's case. The evidence will establish that Michael Proctor himself, the lead investigator and architect of this entire case, has a long-standing and personal relationship with the Albert family. Yes, that same Albert family. His sister was close friends with Julie Albert. He personally sat at head tables at weddings, or at a head table at weddings with the Albert family. He entrusted the Alberts with babysitting his own children. You heard that correctly. And yet he was the lead detective assigned to investigate the circumstances of a Boston police officer laying dead on the Alberts' front lawn. That's not just bias, you'll learn. That's not just coincidence. That, folks, is corruption. And you'll see how far it went. Michael Proctor was alone with all the critical evidence in this case, alone with Karen Reed's phone, alone with John's phone, alone with video footage, alone with the taillight material, alone when he claimed to recover evidence from 34 Fairview. He wrote the search warrants. He transported the evidence. He secured it. He submitted it. He did it all. That's Michael Proctor. And he did it without any reasonable oversight. You'll see during the trial that he intentionally lied and fabricated evidence during the course of this investigation. He lied in reports, warrants. He lied in
reports and warrants. Really? I haven't seen any evidence of that. What are they talking about? JMS, thanks for the super sticker. Appreciate you supporting this live stream.
Under oath. He lied about the time that he actually secured Karen Reed's vehicle. Why? Why would he lie about that? The evidence will give you the answer. He lied because he did not want it revealed that he had access to that vehicle and he had access to that taillight before any taillight fragments were found at 34 Fairview. Appreciate that. He had access to the vehicle before a single piece.
So do you think Karen Reed is changing her strategy? What happened from a fight to a fall down the stairs? You're being pushed down the stairs. What do you think? You think that's true? True, a dog attacked him and he fell down the stairs? I mean, it would be perfectly in line with her abusive, coercive, controlling relationship of John O'Keefe. I mean, just the way an abusive partner. I mean, this is really the end result, her running over John O'Keefe with her SUV and leaving him to die there in the cold. Something I think she was fantasizing about for a long time as the relationship soured. John O'Keefe didn't wear a coat. You had to think. If you're Karen Reed in your dark moments, and Karen Reed being a psychopath doesn't have any attachment or feelings. We've never seen her show any remorse, any sadness, any sense of loss for for her murder of John O'Keefe. But you have to think, right, that it would be really bad for John O'Keefe. He got caught in, say, a nor'easter without a coat, or if he was incapacitated without a coat. And I'm sad that Hank Brennan isn't bringing Natalie Bernschneider-Mawicki, who was the middle person between Karen Reed and Aidan Carney, Turtle Boy Carney, the blogger, in the beginning. And so Natalie would relay Karen Reed's messages to Turtle Boy and vice versa until they started talking directly on the Signal app. Strangely, the same app that was a favorite app of Alan Jackson's, quote unquote, according to Daniel Wolf, the ARCA guy who talked to the defense team on the Signal app, where you can set it so that your messages automatically delete once you send them. But I'm sad that Natalie Bernschneider-Mawicki, who was on the witness list, isn't being called up, or I think someone else mentioned it in the chat, or Karen Reed's own father, or her sister-in-law.
Of taillight material was ever found at the scene. You'll find that there were two searches. The first and second search found zero, nothing. Nothing around John's body, nothing in the street, not one piece of taillight fragment. But once Michael Proctor had that SUV and had the taillight in his custody and control, suddenly items started magically showing up, and not just a few items. 46 pieces of bright red taillight laying in the snow, supposedly found in the exact same spot that was searched not once, but twice by independent officers. Came up with zero. To be clear, you'll learn that before Michael Proctor had access to that taillight, not a single piece was ever recovered at 34 Fairview. That will become vitally, vitally important. And what about those shards of plastic, by the way? What about this DNA that the Commonwealth mentioned? They're going to try to dazzle you with talk of DNA because it sounds so scientific. DNA was on the taillight, but you'll learn that there was no DNA on the actual shards that they claim came in contact with John's arm. None. There was no blood, no tissue, no skin, no DNA on a single shard of plastic that they claim cut deep abrasions into John's arm, the arm that you saw overhead. The DNA that was actually found, the actual science will show it was found outside of the taillight housing where anyone with access to that vehicle would have touched. And it wasn't just one male's DNA. In that exact same sample, there were 3 men found, John and 2 unidentified males. So unless the Commonwealth is going to shift their theory.
Right, to 3 unidentified males, so it could have been the person who installed the taillight. I mean, this DNA doesn't have a timestamp. This is how they confuse people with DNA. Could be DNA picked up on something else. I mean, someone who brushed by it. This is what Barry Schecht, who's founded the Innocence Project, realized, that you could fool people with DNA and fool juries with it and overstate its significance.
That SUV hit 3 men that night, their entire theory falls apart. And speaking of DNA, the evidence will further establish that John O'Keefe's shoe, the one that he was wearing when he was found, was sampled. And that DNA revealed 5, count them, 5 unidentified males.
Right. I mean, they're going to be searching forever, to identify these 5. And does that mean it's incomplete DNA? Is it a complete profile, or is it incomplete DNA that will never be matched to anyone? Tanya Vincent says, Hank is boxing in the defense with not much wiggle room now. Defense has to switch their arguments in real time or tailor it to the evidence presented. But like I said, I had a conversation with a girlfriend today. She was saying there's just no way that they're going to be able to present Marie Russell. I argue they're still going to present all these people because Hank Brennan will mop the floor with them. I don't think it matters. I think they're just going to try to hope to at least fool one juror, because if they get a hung jury this time round, I don't think that the Commonwealth will try Karen Reed again, will they? They're going to try a third time? I mean, this innocence fraud, if she's convicted of something, on the other hand, of anything, even the smallest of charges, this free Karen Reed campaign will go on. It's never going to stop.
Recall that the evidence will establish independently that John was injured someplace warmer and had to be moved onto that lawn. 5 unidentified males touching that shoe. You'll also learn that you are not the first person, not the first to hear about the Commonwealth's theory of this case.
Oh, touching the shoe. That's something that they do. That's an exercise that they do in forensic classes to show you how much DNA they pick up on your body, is to have students how do you say it? Examine all the DNA found on the bottoms of their shoes, because we pick up a ton of DNA. Not all DNA is going to have to do with the crime. There's a lot of DNA probably hanging around your house. I mean, it's not all significant.
That John was hit by an SUV.
That's funny that they're going with the shoes, the 5 profiles on the shoes. Of course, you pick up a lot of DNA. This is also a tactic they used in the fraud that released Haman Lee's killer, Adnan Syed, is to say that there was no DNA of Adnan Syed on the shoes, but there were profiles on her shoes, not on her feet, but in the back of her car. I mean,
That's their theory. The Commonwealth presented this exact same claim to their own medical examiner, a woman by the name of Dr. Irini Scorti-Bello. And you'll learn that after reviewing what's called a law enforcement accident notifier, with law enforcement's theory of the collision written in it, defined in it, after conducting the autopsy herself, after examining John's injuries in detail, she refused to conclude that John's death was a homicide based on the Commonwealth's presentation and their theory. That's right. The Commonwealth's own medical examiner will not deem the manner of death in this case, a homicide. She won't do it. But they're nonetheless back again trying to present the exact same theory to you in this trial. Again, the evidence will show that that is reasonable doubt. Throughout this trial, the Commonwealth will try to convince you of paranormal events, phones calling themselves, messages deleting themselves, Google searches made and then unmade, evidence magically appearing and evidence magically disappearing. But all that smoke and all those mirrors will not ever reach their burden, because that's what this case is ultimately about. It's about the Commonwealth's burden of proof. You'll learn that during the trial, the Commonwealth bears the highest burden known to our justice system. They must prove every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. And you'll learn that moral certainty means the highest level of certainty known in human affairs. It's not a small thing. They're not going to be able to do that. Not when every piece of this case was handled by a disgraced investigator with a motive to protect his friends, not when the physical evidence contradicts their very theory, not when their own medical examiner won't call this case a homicide based on the exact theory that they're presenting to you, not when the conduct of those in the House and the utter lack of investigation speaks volumes about those who actually.
I mean, you're talking about causation, and they're just saying, how did he die? Well, when it's like a knife wound, of course you're going to say, did they end it all, or was it a homicide? Here, where a car is used as a weapon, there's no way for the medical examiner to know that. And so they're going to exploit that, the defense team? Seriously?
Have something to hide. By the end of this trial, you'll conclude that Karen Reed is not guilty of hitting John O'Keefe with her SUV. There was no collision. She's the victim of a botched and biased and corrupted investigation that was never about the truth, folks. It was about preserving loyalty. You'll find that this case is the very definition of reasonable doubt. And at the end of this trial, we'll ask you to return the only verdicts, all three of them, that are consistent with the evidence, the science, the truth, and justice. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Thank you.
Okay, so
Folks, why don't we take off?
so he's doing some neurolinguistic programming, painting pictures with words. So just as he opened on no collision, no collision, no collision, he's closing on not guilty, both 3 times, repetition. So just keep repeating things, hammering home your point without really proving it, throwing out aspersions on people without really much proof. I don't know. Sounds like he's got a good case, right? Until you actually see what their case is. So anyway, I wanted to watch that. I didn't get a chance to go over that in the beginning. It's something that I've wanted to go over. Thanks for watching it with me. Let me know what you think. Please hit the thumbs up. Support the channel. The links are in the description of this episode. You can buy me a coffee, send a donation via Venmo, or become a Patreon supporter. All 3 great ways to support the channel and these live streams. I will be back very soon. Talk more Karen Reed. Have a great night, everyone, and thanks so much for listening.
I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment. I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system I clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mark. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit. Yeah. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system I clown.